Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Checking in on the legal woes of President Donald Trump. The latest in the Georgia case against him brought by the district attorney in Fulton County is 3 guilty pleas by members of his legal team who assisted in his efforts after the 2020 election to reverse the result there. The latest is on Tuesday. This was a plea by Jenna Ellis. And let's listen to a piece of an apology that she read in court.
In the wake of the 2020 presidential election, I believed that challenging the results on behalf of President Trump should be pursued in a just and legal way. I endeavored to represent my client to the best of my ability. I relied on others, including lawyers with many more years of experience than I, to provide me with true and reliable information, especially since my role involved speaking to the media and to legislators in various states. What I did not do, but should have done, Your Honor, was to make sure that the facts the other lawyers alleged to be true were in fact true. In the frenetic pace of attempting to raise challenges to the election in several states, including Georgia, I failed to do my due diligence. I believe in and I value election integrity. If I knew then what I know now, I would have declined to represent Donald Trump in these post-election challenges. I look back on this whole experience with deep remorse.
What Jenna Ellis pleaded to was a felony of aiding and abetting false statements and writings related to a Georgia Senate Judiciary Subcommittee meeting where, according to some of the court filings, she knowingly, willfully, unlawfully made following false statements, including all sorts of things like 2,500 felons voted, 66,000 underage people illegally registered to vote, and so forth. Kim, the other 2 guilty pleas are those of Kenneth Chesborough, who got a sentence for 1 count of conspiracy to file false documents, and then Sidney Powell, who pleaded guilty to a set of misdemeanors. Kim, all of them are apparently going to avoid jail time. All of them have agreed to assist in this case brought by the Fulton County District Attorney, and potentially that could mean testifying against President Trump if we get there, though it is not clear, at least to my eye, how close these 3 people were to him and how much they could actually implicate him.
Yeah, I agree. So remember, this case was brought by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, and she indicted a whole number of people, close to, more than almost 24 people as part of this, alleging this sort of sweeping racketeering conspiracy charge, suggesting, that Donald Trump and this vast organization had engaged in something akin to a mafia operation. And what we have here are some of the people that were in that orbit who those indictments were brought against, pleading guilty to charges, which I should note, not any of them are going to get any jail time as a result of it. Miss Ellis is getting probation plus restitution, community service. Chesborough got a similar sentence. Sidney Powell, who was the other one, only pleaded guilty to misdemeanors. And these seem designed, in essence, to make these charges go away without jail time. And that's why you see a lot of the press, rubbing their hands and sort of salivating, as they often do, suggesting that there's great legal significance to these plea deals and that somehow this really signals curtains for Donald Trump. I think that the fact instead that Miss Willis is letting these lawyers agree to kind of minor charges without the racketeering portion of this being brought to bear may suggest, in fact, that there is an underlying weakness to her case. There were all kinds of people that Donald Trump surrounded himself with back in 2020, many of them putting forward some hard-to-believe theories to sort of suggest that they were all united behind one uniting theory with conspiracy on their mind. I think is a lot harder to prove. And so I'm not really sure these things show anything other than that the prosecutor brought the charges. Some people are trying to now disentangle themselves from that case, but I'm not sure it says a lot about the actual case she's trying to bring against Donald Trump itself.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that these guilty pleas are meaningless or that they don't involve activity that ought to be punished. When I read through the indictment, the most serious sections of it, to my eye, Monet, were those involving Sidney Powell. She allegedly, after the election, hired a contractor to go to Coffee County, Georgia, where, and my understanding is, they were let into the local elections office there and started meddling with the equipment, including allegedly removing voter data. And given the importance of security, physical security of these voting machines, I understand why the state would say that it has an interest in protecting that and deterring the idea that one side in an election after the fact is going to get access to the voting machines to do some sort of forensic analysis. I get why the state wants to block that off. But to Kim's point, there was this whole racketeering conspiracy alleged. None of these three lawyers have pleaded guilty to anything close to racketeering. And so these pleas are obviously not great news for the defense, given that they may involve testimony against President Trump. But to my eye, the theories that the district attorney has advanced here are still untested. One of them is the racketeering theory. Another one involves that famous call or infamous call between President Trump and the Secretary of State, where he's asking the Secretary of State to find fraud. The district attorney is saying that that is basically asking the Secretary of State to violate his oath of office, which is a crime in the state of Georgia. I don't think that anything that we've seen in these pleas so far has provided backup to the idea that these legal theories the DA is advancing are going to hold up in court.
I mean, I'll take that last point first about Trump's call with Brad Raffensperger, who was the Secretary of State of Georgia at the time. I do think that the plain reading of what Trump said to Raffensperger to find him those missing votes, there is a reasonable way to interpret that as asking him to breach his duty and to essentially change the election outcome. Now, as we have pointed out, and as the Trump team suggests, it's very clear that they can argue that Donald Trump intended this to mean he believed that there was fraud and was simply asking the Secretary of State to do his duty of correcting the vote totals. And that is a plausible theory. And if true, then Trump does have a defense. But I do think that that is a little bit more of an ambiguous question. And theoretically, there could be some evidence to suggest that Trump was asking Raffensperger to tamper. I think that it is up to the prosecution to prove that. And it's very possible, theoretically, that they could, although no evidence that we've seen suggests that they are able to. But the broader question about the RICO charge against Donald Trump and some of his alleged co-conspirators, I think that you're absolutely right in that they have showed that there were certain actions that the Trump team took that did cross a line beyond just making dubious statements to the press, suggesting that there had been fraud. You do have incidents like Sidney Powell actually asking one of her hired employees to tamper with the voting machine that does cross a certain line. But none of this suggests that it was directly coordinated criminal conspiracy among the Trump team. And it certainly does not have a thread that points back to Donald Trump himself as being in contact with all of his lawyers and asking them to take these actions on his behalf, which traditionally has been what's required to make a RICO charge stick. And so it does seem as if the prosecution is basically making smaller allegations and allowing these pleas from some of the members of Trump's team that don't amount to pieces of the broader conspiracy theory that they're trying to prove, but we'll see if they're able to come up with anything more substantial as it goes on.
Thank you, Monet and Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back next week with another edition of Potomac Watch.